what are these costs that are associated with Medicare, and how do we get to that number that we just shared with everybody that said, hey, you might need 300, $400,000 in retirement for your healthcare needs, right? So part of that is your premiums for Medicare. It's not free. Part A, which is the inpatient hospital part, there's not a charge for it if you're eligible. Now, eligibility means that you basically paid into the payroll system, the US payroll system, for 10 years. It's very similar to getting the maximum earnings on your Social Security, where they look back over 40 quarters or basically 10 years. So if you worked in the US or you contributed to a payroll system that paid into the US tax system for 10 years or more, chances are you're eligible for Part A. Now, there's a misnomer a lot of times, because I hear this from clients all the time when I say, hey, what kind of money have you saved for Medicare medical costs? And they go, I don't need any. I got Medicare. It covers everything. And it doesn't, because everything has its limits in the world of insurance. Even the government has its limits. So like, for instance, in Part A, what a lot of times people forget about is you have a $1,600 inpatient deductible, meaning that if you go into the hospital and let's say you're there for 20, 30 days, there's a per day fee. Well, that first $1,600 comes out of your pocket. And then after that, Medicare Part A starts to pay for the rest. And that's per 60 days. So it's not an annual thing. It rolls every 60 days. So if you're in the hospital for 70 days, you may incur this deductible potentially twice. The other thing that people forget is a lot of times if you have had a serious medical condition, let's say you have a stroke or something of that nature, you may need to go into a skilled nursing facility for a period of time. And while Medicare will cover the first handful of days, usually like up to 20 days or so, once you start getting beyond that, you could have a per day cost for that skilled nursing. So even though Medicare covers a lot of things, when you get into some of these extreme situations, you may find that it doesn't cover everything and you end up getting a bill during a stressful time. So Part B, now the outpatient part, this year it's running right about $174 a month for most people. There's some exceptions to this. If you're a high wage income, there's a different scale if you have a certain income over certain areas. But for most people that we talk to, Part B is about $174 a month. It gets deducted from your Social Security payment. And what you have to think about Part B is that you have a $240 annual deductible, meaning that every year the $240 dollars basically comes out of your pocket. And then after that, it's an 80-20 split. So even on Part B, you have this 20% copay. So when we get into this conversation about, hey, do I take Medicare Advantage Part C or a supplement plan, you have to think about, and we'll recircle back to this conversation, which is, hey, how could this copay affect my long-term expenses? So that's something to keep in mind. So Justin, before I go on to Plan C, any questions you have or anything you want to add to that?
No, just that 80-20 thing can add up that 20% could add up pretty quick if you need some sort of, outpatient like surgery or something like that. It could, yeah.
Yeah, if you
Just
have a lot of dates with doctors, it can add up.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. If you're in the business of dating doctors via Medicare, it can catch up to you.
And I know we'll get into, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself because I know both you and I have some you know, family experience that people that have already that family wise that are already in A and B have actually been pretty happy with what's gone on. So don't automatically assume that Part A and Part B are just the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, no.
So
Hey,
yeah,
it services a lot of needs. I mean, they've really built this well for people. So let's say you are looking and you do your homework on Part A and B, and you realize, hey, there's so many little gaps in here that I could see where I get little nickeled and dimed. Then you can look at Part C, or what they call Medicare Advantage, because what that is that's basically a package plan that can be offered by another provider. Like I mentioned, Aetna is one of the providers, Humira, there's quite a few of them out there. And Part C can cost anywhere from nothing to up to $200 a month. And it can include Part D, which is the prescription plan. Most people that are doing Part Ds, when I kind of searched out what's the average cost per month, it's about $59 a month. So that's what the thing to look at is, hey, if your Part C has a very low premium or low cost, and it includes Part D, it may not be such a bad deal. And like you were saying, Justin, we know quite a few people who've used Part C, and we'll get into the next slide. We'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of that. But all these things work very well. It's doing the homework on what your needs are. So if you want to compare that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and with Part D, what you want to do, at least in my research, is that if you are an individual that has a kind of a list of medications that you're taking, when you go sign up, if you are going to sign up for a Part D plan, you want to go and say, okay, here's my list. Which plan does out of my list, which plan covers most of that? And that's kind of what you want to look for. Don't just go pick one and assume that it's going to cover all of the medications that you could be taking signing up for this.
Yeah, a lot about Medicare planning is doing your homework on what doctors you have, what medications you have, are they provided in these different programs. So if you're somebody who's saying, okay, do I do Part A and B or do I do Part C, or do I do Part A and B and buy what's called a supplement plan? Then the thing to think about is the average Medicare supplement plan, or what they call a Medigap plan. Now, this is where you can purchase it this is where you could do Parts A and B and then add a supplement plan rather than doing Part C. What you have to understand is that most of those Medicare supplement plans, if you do what is like the premier tier, like what they call Plan G, right now it's about $130 to $140 a month for somebody who's around 65 years old. So if you're putting all this together, like if you're saying, okay, Colby, simplify all this, what it means is that if you're somebody that if you're coming up to Medicare age, you should expect that your Medicare is going to cost you somewhere between $200 to $250 a month